Are you ready to create riches in your work and life? It's time for Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV, where you can discuss, debate, and get advice on how to discover and shed the bitches of fear, insecurity, self-doubt, and negativity, so you can realize your dreams and life purpose and create and accelerate the riches in life you deserve. So let's welcome your Ball of Fire host, Bernadette Bose.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV. Of course, I am Bernadette Bose of Ball of Fire Coaching, and this is being brought to you by Ball of Fire Media. Well, I am so excited that you're here today because I want you to be unapologetic as we go through this discussion, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But I want to first thank all of our new and ongoing viewers and listeners. You've been absolutely fabulous each week, sharing and tweeting and posting and liking and subscribing, following, rating, and please continue to do that because your input provides additional eyes and ears into the program. More importantly, you have been providing us the recommendations for the topics that we talk about and the guests that we have. So that's huge because we want to bring you the people and the topics that are of interest to you. So please continue doing that on any one of our Shedding the Bitch platforms across Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. We get a lot of them there. So please continue to do that as it really allows us to make sure that we're hitting the sweet spot of what it is you want to hear about each week. All right. I also need to thank our sponsors. NG Tax Solutions is a full-service financial and tax services company that services small to corporate-sized clients. Debbie Smelling and her team are fabulous, whether it's your personal or business needs. So please reach out to her at ngtaxsolutions.com. And then, as I've mentioned, that we have a more local Georgia sponsor, and that is Up Top Roofing of Atlanta. And Jay and his team have been kind of part of the Shedding the Bitch community for a good number of years now. And he just absolutely loves it and loves what we're doing and has kind of reached out and said, I'd love to sponsor what it is that you're doing. So if you have any home services or roofing needs in the Atlanta, Georgia area, please reach out to Jay and his team at up-toproofingofATL@yahoo.com. All right, now let me introduce this topic because, again, you're going to want to be very unapologetic as we go through this conversation with our guest. So we're going to be talking about how you should unapologetically claim your entrepreneurial success. So our guest, she provides a combination of personal and professional development, entrepreneurial development, to help you accelerate the riches in your work and life from the inside out. That's key, from the inside out. So what we're going to be discussing is why creating your own definition of success is crucial and how to stake your claim unapologetically with and then ways to use your vision and your voice to elevate your success. Now, for our guest and for all of you, especially those of you that are new to the show, I provide you a rich question. So what these are questions that really help ground you in the discussion. So you might join us and say, is this for me? And yet at the same time, this question really has you start thinking about it even before we get into the discussion. And then 99% of the time you go, there is something in this for me and I need to continue listening or watching. So your rich question about our topic today is really on a scale of 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, how unapologetic are you right now about your own entrepreneurial journey? Now, we do have some corporate professionals out there, so you could also be considering that for yourself as well. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how unapologetic are you about the fact that you're pursuing your dreams and going after your entrepreneurial passion? So let me introduce our guest. She is the Entrepreneur Coach. Bri Seeley helps female entrepreneurs create highly profitable businesses. She believes that entrepreneurship is the way to close the wage gap once and for all. Bri works with both established and emerging female entrepreneurs to develop their custom business strategy, take effective actions, and streamline their systems to ultimately boost their profits. So whether they're ready to make your first dollar or your first million, the Entrepreneurial Coach Bri Seeley will help you create long-term sustainable success on your terms. An entrepreneur herself since 2007, Bri was the recipient of Stevie Awards for Business Coach of the Year and Business Woman of the Year, and named Outstanding Business Owner by the Los Angeles Mayor's Office. She is the top entrepreneur coach on Google and has been featured on hundreds of outlets, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Yahoo, and more. So please help me welcome our guest, Bri Seeley. How are you, Bri?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this because nothing gets me more excited about helping people claim apologetically what it is that they're going after. But before we get there, I always like to help our viewers and listeners get to know our guests kind of personally. So what can you tell us about yourself outside of maybe the workspace, and then we'll certainly get into our conversation.
So a few fun facts. I am a proud cat mama. My baby has been with me for 16 years.
Oh, my.
And I actually have a tattoo of her on my shoulder. We've had quite the journey together. She has lived in more states than the average American has been to.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so little known facts.
That's awesome. And what is her name, by the way?
Her name is Peaches.
Oh, Georgia Peaches. No, but that's adorable. Peaches. How cool is that? Well, I love that fact. Now, at the same time, when it comes to your own journey, what was it about kind of hitting on this topic about, female entrepreneurs really unapologetic, you know what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a hard word.
Unapologetically claim their entrepreneurial success. What was it about that was important to you?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest in a super small town. I was raised by a single mom. My dad passed away when I was in my teens, owing my mom a lot of money in child support. Oh. And as a result, my mom had to work really hard when I was growing up. In fact, I think at one point she had like 2 jobs and then also took on like multiple side projects just to make ends meet, right? And so I watched her kind of struggle in terms of her earning capacity. And then, I got into my own journey and really kind of decided that I didn't want to have those same struggles. And even though, I just turned 39 this weekend, we are still, as women, under-earning our potential. Mm-hmm. And they say, I've read reports that it'll take everywhere from 150 to 250 years mm-hmm. for us to close the wage gap. Mm-hmm. And I look at that information and I'm like, it's actually really simple. Like, if corporations wanted to, they could choose to close the wage gap. Like, they could just decide to do that. And mm-hmm. for for at least 100 years, they have chosen not to do that. Mm-hmm. So what are we waiting for? And so, I watched my mom struggle to make money. I struggled at the beginning of my career, and I just decided that I was done with it. And so the more and more I got into my entrepreneurial journey, I realized that this wasn't just the case for me and, my mom, it was the case for a lot of women, is that not only are we under-earning in the corporate sphere, but we're also holding ourselves back from our earning potential in the entrepreneurial sphere. And so, I'm passionate about entrepreneurship because to me, it is the pathway to unlimited access, whether that be wealth, whether that be time freedom, whether,
right.
Whatever that thing is that you want to create. But for me, entrepreneurship is that path where we as women get to finally say, I'm taking responsibility for creating the life that I want to be living. And it's up to me to say yes to that path. So that's kind of how I've spun into being more and more and more passionate about entrepreneurship over the last 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's two elements of your story and what it is that you kind of, what your platform is and what you coach on and what you speak on. And so the first one I want to ask about is, you had just mentioned that we're holding ourselves back. Women are holding themselves back. How are we doing that?
So first off, we consistently, all of the women I work with, consistently, my first piece of insight to them is you need to raise your prices. So we tell all these stories about how we can't charge what we need to be charging. A lot of new entrepreneurs tell stories about how they can't charge that because they're inexperienced, yet most of them are coming in with decades of experience, just not working for themselves, right? Working for someone else.
Right.
And so, I mean, a lot of it is our pricing, but it's also our mindset. You know, we have all grown up with this idea that we deserve to earn less. And so we end up bringing that with us, not just in the corporate world, but into our businesses as well. And then we start to run our businesses from this idea that we need to charge less and we need to earn less.
Right. Well, and wouldn't you say pricing, it is mindset. It equals mindset. Whatever your mindset is, that's what you're pricing yourself at. Yep. You know, good, bad, or indifferent. And therefore, the focus has to be on addressing the mindset.
I mean, that's a huge piece of what I work with women around in general is mindset and belief work. You know, one of my mentors wrote the foreword to my book, and what he wrote was, whatever you believe to be true becomes possible for you. So if you believe something to be impossible for you, then that becomes your reality. Yeah. And so the interesting thing is, you and I, Bernadette, could both believe radically different things. You could believe that you're only worth 6 figures a year, and I could believe I'm worth 7, and we're both right.
Right.
So your beliefs definitely are the seed from which your results then begin to grow.
Yep. Yep. It's so true. So, okay. So then the second part of this that I loved about your story is just the whole thing about entrepreneurs when it comes to, especially those that leave corporate and come into entrepreneurship. And here they might be making very nice 6-figure salaries, and then all of a sudden kind of diminish the value they already had, like the benchmark that they already had. And they're already kind of, negative, subtract. So what do you coach on, or how do you support your clients when it comes to using kind of where they already are from a corporate perspective, or maybe even from whatever experience they have perspective, to quantify it in such a way that helps them close that gap?
So one of the first things is that I know that this especially happens with women. It might happen with men as well, but we have this idea that we need someone else to give us money, and that's kind of the only way to make money, right? So like we need to be under an employer in order to have a paycheck. I can't tell you how many times women come to me and they're like, oh, I just am really nervous about starting a business because I won't have a steady or consistent paycheck. And I'm like, but you will. It's just different because you don't have an employer giving it to you.
Right.
You get to create it for yourself. And so I think that's one of the biggest first off mindset shifts for women, especially coming from corporate into entrepreneurship, is that it's not someone that's like handing you a paycheck consistently every week. The power dynamics shift where you are the one who's not empowered in a corporate setting. You are the one receiving from the one who has the power, and then you are walking into entrepreneurship being the one who has the power. And the shift is that you then get to create your results for yourself.
Yeah.
So I remind women then from that point that they actually deserve to make more because of that, right? You're taking on more responsibilities.
Right.
You're taking on more actions.
Right.
Maybe your employer is the one that brings in the clients and you just get to serve them. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, you're both bringing in the clients and serving them, right? So I like to remind women of like the actual proof of things, not to mention going back and saying, quantify your experience. What are the wins that you've had? What is the proof that you've had? And we kind of just walk through the comparison and we look at it as facts rather than, the perceptions that we've created in our minds.
Yes. And have you found, only because I come from a corporate services background, and so I was kind of billed out, at a certain rate. And so when I came out on my own in 2008, I already had that baseline. It was kind of like, okay, I was making $500 an hour, billed out to clients for my company, for the business, why don't I just continue doing that? Because my value and contribution hasn't changed. Just the person, like you said, writing the check is now changing. Does that make sense? Is that something that they could also consider and we're not just talking pricing. I don't want to make it seem as if we're just talking about pricing. It's really them valuing themselves, right?
Totally, yeah. And I mean, if that's a good benchmark for you, that you can start there, then start there, right? One thing I like to encourage women is you don't want to go from, nothing to everything and then spin yourself out into imposter syndrome and just like go so far out of your comfort zone that it paralyzes you.
Right.
So if you have a gauge on where your thermostat is currently set, then start there and then give yourself a benchmark. Okay, right. In 6 months, I'm going to reevaluate. And then generally, right, when we're turning up a thermostat, literally, our furnace doesn't necessarily have the capability to jump from 70 degrees to 100 degrees, right? It increases degree by degree by degree by degree. And so that's how you can look at your pricing as well, is start with where you currently feel good and schedule something into your calendar to make sure you're reevaluating and reassessing that on a regular basis. Because I think oftentimes too, we just end up setting our prices and we get so comfortable in them that we just continue doing that and we forget that, our expertise is growing, our value is growing, and we need to, consistently be reevaluating where we're at in terms of our worth and our value.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. So when it comes to apologetically claiming, first off, what does that look like? To literally, what does that feel like, smell like? I mean, what does it mean for someone to unapologetically? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, here's the interesting thing is that it's really different for every single person. So for me, when I think about owning the fullness of who I am in the world and what I'm here to bring and the impact I'm here to make, I can feel it in my body. I can feel it's kind of like this effervescence or bubblies inside my body that really excites me and helps me continue to get up and move forward every day. And so what I would say to people is when one of the things I really recommend, and this is something I teach a lot of as well, is really first off, giving yourself permission to want what you want. How often do we think I would love to do this thing someday, but, and we're constantly putting those buts in and we're constantly stopping ourselves and cutting ourselves off and bringing us back to that's not reality. Well, it will never be your reality if you keep cutting yourself off from it. So give yourself permission to sit down and think about all of the things that you desire. If you had unlimited access to whatever you needed to make it happen, what would you do? What is the life that you would create? And then how does that feel on the inside? So those are some little ways to begin. And then once you've kind of crafted that, and again, every single person's definition of success is different.
Yes.
I have a podcast. I've interviewed over 100 people about their definitions of success. Even people that both may have the same, have the definition of say freedom. It looks different for every single person. So give yourself permission to want what you want. Give yourself permission to create that unique definition. See how it feels in your body. And then you just have to start each day asking how can I get 1% closer to that vision today?
Right. I love that because you talk about the fact that you help them develop their custom business strategy. And I would expect that some people might look at their vision, what you're describing right now, as part of their business strategy, and other people really wouldn't see that. But is that a big part of what you do with your clients is help them get comfortable, being uncomfortable about defining what it is that they really want?
Absolutely. I talk a lot, especially if you're looking at growing your business, there's three really key ingredients. Yes, it's your customer. Yes, it's your business, your services, you're offering your product, but it's also you. And so if you're building out a business that, say, goes against your core values, or if you're building out a business that is counter to that vision that you have, it's going to be really difficult, one, to show up for that business every single day and continue to be motivated by it. And you're going to have a really hard time building it because it's constantly in opposition to who you are in the world.
Yep.
Quick example of this, my first 8 years of business, I was a fashion designer. I had my own fashion label. And what I discovered after I closed it down is that my top core value is actually freedom. And when I discovered that, closing down my fashion brand made so much sense. Even though it had already been closed for 18 months, it made so much sense because what I realized was having a fashion business is not freedom inducing. I had to have an office in downtown LA. I had to have machinery and equipment and supplies and merchandise and go to the post office all the time and be in person and doing fittings and like all these requirements that really felt like prison to me. So you are a huge element of whether you're starting a business or growing a business. You are kind of the beginning and the end of your business to a point. And so you have to make sure that your values, your vision, your zone of genius, your desires are all being incorporated into that business, either plan or growth strategy, depending on what stage you're at.
Right. I love that because I won't go into it. A lot of our viewers and listeners know my story, but I dealt with that for a good number of years at the beginning of my journey. And I'm so glad that I found it sooner. I found the disconnect, I wasn't being congruent to kind of who I was and what I wanted. And it's so liberating. So if anyone listening or watching have an opportunity to work through that with someone like Bri, then certainly you want to do that because that's a huge part. Now, or actually in more detail, what really stops women from being unapologetic, just owning what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it?
Yeah, so two of them we've already touched on. One, kind of the societal ideas of, who we are and what we're, women are supposed to be in the world, what we're, I always say when women entered into the workforce, we entered in, for the most part, the masses of women entered in around World War II. And at that time, we were told what positions we could occupy, how many of those positions were available to us as women, and then what we were allowed to make in those positions. And the truth is that we've made a little bit of changes and a little bit of evolution, but for the most part, that hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. So, that's a huge one. That's a big one. We have to decondition ourselves from the learnings that we've had around those ideas. The next one that we've also kind of talked about a little bit is just our own narratives, our own self-talk about what's possible for us, about, what we're capable of, about what we deserve, all of that stuff. And I would say the last thing is the people around us. And this can be a really hard one for people because we hold on to a lot of people simply because they've been in our lives up to this point. And so, they need to occupy the same roles in our lives for the rest of it. And it's just not true. And not to say that you should just arbitrarily be going out and cutting people out of your lives. But if there are people around you that don't understand your life as an entrepreneur or don't support you in making more money or are around you all the time telling you that you need to shut your business down or go get a job or, any of those things, that can have hugely detrimental impact to you, not your mindset, but also the results you're creating in your business. Mm-hmm. So, making sure that you're being really clear about who's around you, how they're contributing positively and negatively to you. And then if they are contributing negatively to you, having the gumption to put in place boundaries, whether that means that you sit down and have a conversation around you are not allowed to bring up these topics with me again, or it's something like you have firmer boundaries where you just don't engage in a in-depth relationship with them any longer. I think that's probably one of the hardest ones for people.
Sure.
It's so important. You have to have people around you, not to say that you need to surround yourself with yes people, right? All people that are like, yes, you're doing great when you're not. Right. But you need to be surrounded by people that are going to encourage you and motivate you to continue to get better and to do the best that you can unapologetically as an entrepreneur in the world. Yeah.
Well, and I love that because, some of those people that you're talking about are like parents, children, spouses, or partners, significant people. Forget about like even the best friend. But some of them are like, blood. Some of them are, housemates and children mates and whatnot. So kind of creating those boundaries. I love that. Or sitting down and having a conversation. Because it's those people that so many people are like, they really sacrifice their unapologetically claiming what it is that they want because they don't want to hurt or miss expectations. What more beyond sitting them down should they be focused on in order to kind of help get people on board and or if they're not on board, they still have to live in the same house maybe?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say about that is reminding you that having one conversation is oftentimes not enough. So it's going to take continued boundary settings to say, hey, we had a conversation about this and you agreed that, da-da-da-da. So that's the first thing. The other thing I would say too is that, oftentimes people are supporting us in the way that they want to be supported or based on the paradigm that they live in. So I'll give you an example of this. And I say this up front, I love my parents. I love my parents so much. And I live and work and operate in a radically different world than they do. Neither is right nor wrong, but they grew up in a society or world where there were certain things that qualified a job and income, right? I live in a world where with access to the internet, I have clients everywhere. My parents have no idea how I make money in my business. And so because of that, my stepdad, bless his heart, has said to me, now remind you, I've been an entrepreneur since 2007. He said this to me as early as August of last year, so 6 months ago. He said to me, I really think that you should go out and get a job. And he's not saying it out of malice, right? He's saying it because he literally doesn't have the paradigm to fully comprehend or understand my world or how I make money in my business, right? Yeah. So part of it is you also have to kind of disconnect a little bit and remember that what they're saying 9 times out of 10 isn't even about you. Right. In fact, most times it doesn't even have anything to do with you. Right. So oftentimes if we can sit down with people and in that conversation say, you're not supporting me in a way that's helpful to me, and here's why, and here's how you can support me. A lot of people will show up to support you differently, but they don't know how. So if you can teach them or tell them how. So I sat down with my stepdad in August and said, you are not allowed to ever again bring up this conversation to me ever. And here's why. And I laid out for him. And as since, knock on wood, the conversation has not come up again. And now my parents are supportive of me in a different way than they have been in the past as well. Nice. So don't just have the conversation around you're not allowed to speak to me this way. Here's how I would prefer to communicate with you, or here's the support I would prefer to receive from you, and then see if they're able to show up for you.
Yeah. And isn't it too, though, because sadly, my father had passed away before I went out on my own. But he was an entrepreneur too, raised 12 kids. He was in corporate just like me for a long period of time and then went out on his own. But I could hear him when I started my business. I could hear him voicing concern because of the risk, because of the, instability initially, because he's just scared, so a friend or a family or a parent or a friend could just also be expressing emotions that seem as if they're kind of attacking or offending, but it's coming from a place of concern and fear.
Yeah, and which again, I would say it's the concern and fear of that person too, right? So again, yes, they're directing it at you, but at the end of the day, again, it kind of doesn't really have anything to do with you, and it's your choice at the end of the day whether you want to adopt those concerns and fears as well, or if you want to operate in a different paradigm to create, a different reality for yourself. So again, it's that unapologetically taking a stand for, here's what I'm choosing. Yes, I acknowledge that there's risk involved, but I also acknowledge that I have the power to create whatever I want to create. So what am I focusing on and what am I creating? And that gets to be my driving force. That gets to be who I show up as unapologetically in my business every single day. And, I can love and bless the people that have care and concern for me. And I still get to go out and do the vision that I have set forth for myself because I can and I deserve it.
Now, do you run into but do you run into clients, maybe they're a parent, you focus on female entrepreneurs, and maybe they're a parent, maybe even a parent to a daughter. And so, do they recognize somewhat the responsibility to kind of ensure that they take a stand and they kind of work on themselves and unapologetically claim their entrepreneurial success as a reflection and an example to their young daughters?
Absolutely. In fact, so I personally am permanently and just by choice child-free. But I actually love working with moms because I know that my work with them isn't stopping at them. Right. It's going to be modeled to their daughters. In fact, I was actually at an entrepreneurial event this weekend, and daughters were invited to come. And there were 5- and 6-year-old little girls there who were like, yep, my mommy does this every single day, and this is the name of her business. Like 5 years old, they know exactly what is going on with their mom's careers. And same here, I would go to work with my mom at the age of 5. And so, I think it's really important that we do, as we're shifting this paradigm in the world, we're also shifting it for the generations that are coming after us. So I love working with moms because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that work is going, 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations down the line. And for me, that's part of my legacy is like, I want to leave this world, especially for women, better than how I found it. And that's one of probably the easiest ways to do it.
Yeah, I love that. It's your legacy. I absolutely love that. And yes, it's a huge way of doing it, right? If we can get women our age, our generation, and then their children, and then they pass it on to their children, then maybe that 150 years isn't as, the gap isn't as large as it is today. I love that. So what would you tell our listeners and viewers what they can do or what steps they could take, even like as we're talking? And remember, everyone, I gave you a rich question on a scale of 1 to 10. How unapologetic are you? So if you're down at like a 1 to 5, definitely be reaching out to Bri. And if you are, even 5 to 10, continue to reach out to Bri at the same time, because there's always something more to learn and there's more growth. But what would you tell them that they could start doing immediately to stop doubting themselves and to stop, and what I call even shedding their bitches, but also that they honor kind of all, the skills and the expertise and the experience and just the person that they are, so they can unapologetically claim their success?
Yeah. So in terms of the doubt one, I would say I love looking for proof. And so when I'm bumping up against a doubt about myself, I really like to sit down and investigate, is this true? Right? Because we have this really bad habit as humans that when we think a thought, we just automatically believe it to be true. We just assume that it's true simply because we've thought it. Yet the majority of the thoughts that we have are the ones that we thought because of yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before, that are honestly probably thoughts that were programmed in at a very young age that may or may not be true any longer. So I love sitting down with doubts and being like, okay, is this actually true for me? Is it true that I can't, have a quote unquote steady paycheck as a business owner? Is it true that I'm not qualified for this role? Is it true that I need to decrease my rates as as someone that works for themselves? And you really sit down and you don't just conjecture, right? Like you don't just assume or imagine, like you literally find proof about whether or not that's true. So for me, for example, is it true that you can't create a consistent salary for yourself as an entrepreneur? My first year in this business, I went from being unable to pay my rent to having a 6-figure business in under 9 months.
Nice.
And that's been my norm, right? Since I started my business. Not the unable to pay the rent part, but although, there have been bumps along the way as well. It's what happens. But the other thing you can prove to yourself too is resiliency. Like, okay, so I believe that maybe I can't make rent or whatever. Resiliency, that's one thing that I will say that I've proven to myself over and over again as an entrepreneur is how incredibly resilient I am to be able to pick up when I face a bump or when I hit something that isn't necessarily what I wanted and continue moving forward. So that's the first thing I would say in addressing doubts is looking at, is this true or not for me? And then the other thing I would say too is like, go out to some of your biggest cheerleaders in the world and ask them. Like, ask them how they see you. Ask them how they perceive you. And this isn't the people that we talked about before that are telling you not to do things, right? Right. It's a different group of people. Yeah. Know your audiences, right? So go out and ask people their perceptions of you. How do they perceive you to be on the outside? And then how does that differ from the ways that you're doubting yourself on the inside? And then how can you begin to close that gap? Mm-hmm. Which one do you want to be living in? And then how can you close that gap for yourself?
I love that. I actually went through that exercise back in 2010 with my 5 sisters and my mother over cocktails. Trust me when I say, be careful, because you might get everything that you wanted and didn't want. But it is don't you find it for your clients to be extremely liberating for them?
Yeah. And that exercise in particular, it's so fascinating when we ask people how they perceive us.
Right.
Because we look in the mirror every day and we see a certain version of ourselves.
Right.
And it's based on, like I said, for me, 39 years worth of stories and narratives and, all of that stuff that we've picked up along the way that other people just don't have that kind of like baggage with us that we have with ourselves. And they're able to see us in, I would say, almost a pure light. Yeah. And they're able to just really reflect back to us truths that we are oftentimes blinded from seeing because we are still holding on to, that 7-year-old girl that did the thing or that got, whatever, right? So it's a powerful exercise.
Yeah, it really is. And you said something at the beginning, and it keeps coming up in my mind, in my version, as we're talking, but because it was the biggest shift for me. But you had said much earlier in the discussion, something to the effect of, you'd be surprised at how little people think of you. Meaning, like, you're all in your head about, worrying that you're not good enough or smart enough or pretty enough or, capable enough. And yet no one else is thinking it. Like, no one else is spending time thinking about it. It's just, and I think that is so key in regards to, it sounds like the work that you do, because again, mindset is really, they have the skill, right? Your clients have the skill, they have the expertise. I mean, not to say that there isn't new skills, especially if they are becoming a new entrepreneur, that they need to learn, but they have what it takes. It's what's inside. Like you said at the very beginning of this, is you work with people from the inside out. Yep. So how do you do that?
So, the first thing is, obviously, when anyone comes to me, we sit down and we talk about, like, where do you want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And we identify, like, what is that point that you want to get to, and then where do you perceive yourself to be right now, right? So this is where you are, this is where you want to be, what is that gap? And then what I'm particularly skilled at doing, one of my favorite things in the world to do is puzzle. In fact, I started a brand new puzzle this weekend, and so I love being able to, like, okay, we can see the picture of where you want to be. We can see the picture of where you are now. How do we, pull out all the right pieces and configure them in such a way from now until that point so that you're able to kind of puzzle together the pieces to create that new picture that you want to see. And so strategy is just kind of a natural blame it on my grandmother. She started me puzzling when I was very young.
Nice.
And so it's just a very natural thing for me to, when someone tells me where they are and where they want to be, it's like my mind just clicks in and it's like, here's how we're going to get there, right? And like there's a lot more information that I gather as well, but it's really like we start off with like a big assessment of, you know, where all of the information I need to know, and then we put together a plan and a strategy. And then, you know, I work with people either if they're new entrepreneurs for 6 months, if they're established entrepreneurs for 90 days, to then like be building out that strategy, that vision, so that at the end of our work together, you know, if they're new entrepreneurs, they can say they've launched their business and they're starting to, you know, see profits. If they're established entrepreneurs, that they've executed the growth strategy and that they're starting to see momentum. So it's fun. I get to see the results of people's visions like in real time, and it's really cool. And my clients create results that some people would think are just bananas. Like I just helped a client last week strategize her business. I think her first year in business was like $250,000. We just strategized her first $10 million year. Like, nice. And I had a client last year who launched a dog treat company, and within 6 months had done like $13,000 in profits. Oh wait, did I say 6 weeks? Within 6 weeks, she'd done $13,000 in profits, and like nice. Insane things and women getting to like be themselves, right? Unapologetically, like the dog treat lady. You know, she originally was starting an events-based company, and then she was like, I don't really want to be working with people. I'm like, well, what brings you joy? Like, when are you the happiest? And she's like, honestly, when I'm with my dogs and when I'm in the kitchen. And I was like, okay, well, what if you were to try this? And she is so happy. She was an RN before. She's like, I think she's making more money now than she was as an RN. She's so happy. Like, I don't know. I don't think work should be a terrible place. Like, right. I think that we should have the opportunity to be ourselves unapologetically and create the successes that we want unapologetically.
Yeah. And I love it because everything that we're talking about too is so transferable over to those corporate professionals that are also part of our community, because it's whether you walk into someone else's office building, or you walk into your own business, virtually or not virtually, we deserve to be ourselves, and we deserve to love what we're doing. So whatever time we're spending at work is just as enjoyable as what we're doing in life.
Well, and luckily, I think kind of for one of the first times, like employees have the upper hand right now. So, you know, if your company doesn't want to let you be yourself unapologetically, if they don't want to pay you well enough, there is another company out there who will. So, you know, give yourself permission to want what you want and to go after it.
Yeah.
No one else is going to give it to you. So go after what you want and create that reality for yourself.
I love it. I love it. Now, we were talking about, you know, how you were helping your clients, you know, kind of all of a sudden springboard into really starting or growing their business. So help us. You have by the time this airs, or after this airs, you have a 10K in 10-day free challenge. So give us a little bit more detail about that. And then I am also sharing the link of briseeley.com/10K that anyone interested can look into. But share with us what that's all about.
Yeah, so it's funny. I had a friend call me up several years ago and say, I'm doing this weird challenge. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, sure, whatever. What is it? He was like, we're going to make 10K in our business in 10 days. And I was like, okay. And the first time I did it, I failed. Like, I didn't hit 10K at all. But I've done it a few times with colleagues, just kind of behind the scenes. I don't really tell anyone I'm doing it. And this last time I did it in August, I think I did 60K in 10 days. So I was like, why am I not doing this with other people? Like, I want women to make more money in the world, and men too. Guys can join this as well. And like, why would I not launch this as like a public offering? And so for the first time, June 6th through the 17th, I'm doing this 10K in 10 days. We're going to hopefully if you are just getting your business started and 10K is like way outside your comfort zone, probably don't go for 10K. We'll talk about that. But whatever, if you want to make an extra $1,000 in your business, an extra $20,000 in your business, come join us. It's going to be amazing. I am hoping, fingers crossed, for a lot of signups, because the more signups we have, the more collective earning potential that we get to all pool together as well.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. All right, everybody, go to briseeley.com/10K. Check it out. Sign up. What else do you have to lose? 10 days, and you could be springboarding your business and accelerating your business toward the direction you want it to go. And she'll be there to guide you along the way, which is always, it's great to have someone like herself in your circle. So definitely also, if you would, go to briseeley.com and just check her out overall, and see if there's something that she could do for you to help you kind of really take your business to the next level, or even kick off the business that you've been considering and thinking about. Bri, this has been fabulous so much. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thank you. This was lovely. You're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, again, briseeley.com, and also follow her on Instagram, Bri Seeley. She makes it really easy for us, everyone. And then to check out her 10K in 10 days, go to briseeley.com/10K. Thank you, Bri, and we'll talk soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for everyone else, thank you so much for being part of today's show. Again, Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV broadcasts across all your podcast streaming services, on YouTube, and on Facebook, on our Shedding the Bitch Facebook page. So each and every week we bring you top of mind topics and guests for women around the world who are really wanting to shed their bitches of fear, insecurities, and negativity so they create riches in their work and life. And at any point in time, we'd love to hear your comments, suggestions of topics and guests, and just overall what you need from us in the Shedding the Bitch community. All right, I'm Bernadette Bowes of Ball of Fire Coaching. I will look forward to seeing you right back here next Tuesday at noon Eastern Time. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for taking part in Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV with Bernadette Bowes. We would love to know what your biggest takeaway was. Go to Shedding the Bitch on Facebook or YouTube and leave a comment. You can also subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and YouTube so you don't miss a single episode of the show. And with your input, we can help other powerhouse women just like you find the show and decide if it's right for them. Learn more about Bernadette at balloffirecoaching.com. See you next week.